Hello and welcome to the Green Room podcast. I'm your host, Garon Green, and I'm glad that you're here. And before we dive in, I want to share a brief word of caution. In the Green Room, we don't shy away from the raw truth. In our episodes, which contains deep discussions about suicide, substance use, and intense personal grief and loss. These are lived experiences and real stories. Sharing them is part of the healing process, but I know they may be difficult to hear. If you are currently in a place where this content feels a bit heavy and deep, please take care of yourself and feel free to come back later if you need to. You are not alone. Now, let's begin. Episode 7, The Weight of the Mask and the Reality of Loss. So I want to start today's episode, really. I've been thinking about this since I've been on social media, the likes of TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I'm still fairly new to it because I come off after my music journey, I should say. I ended up just coming off social media back in about 2010 and didn't bother for years. And the amount of people who used to say to me, we'd add you on Facebook. And I said I wasn't on it. It really threw people off. I actually somewhat felt alien, really. So I've been, on social media recently over the last couple of years. So Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, you name it, Facebook, mainly to promote my business side of things, because I feel that gone are the days of walking around with flyers and business cards that, welcome to the digital realms of promotion. We can reach so many more people out there. So I wanted to start today with a question, and not just any question, a question specifically for the men listening, guys who are on social media and got quite a vast following. A question I've been thinking about a lot of times is what happens when the likes fall silent? What happens when you put the phone down? The house is quiet, the distractions fade, and suddenly the only thing left is the noise inside your own head. And for a lot of men, that's the moment everything we've been avoiding begins to surface. And I know that feeling well, because before the qualifications, before building my therapy practice, before Garon Green therapies were even thought in my mind, I was a man standing right in the middle of that storm. My foundation wasn't built inside a neat consulting room with textbooks and theory. It was built somewhere much rougher. It was built within addictions. It's been built within homelessness. It's been built with levels of grief that most people, have never had to face. And that element of loneliness out in the world on your own when you reach out for help and nobody's there to help you. My foundation wasn't just built through my counseling training. It was through life experience as well, which I feels, made me grown into the therapist who I am today. And when I talk about things like grief, I'm not talking about the kind you read about in psychology journals. I'm talking about watching people you love disappear from your life one by one. And I'm talking friends, family, people who should really still be here. From my teenage years right through to adulthood, I lost people constantly through accidents, addiction, suicide, illnesses, life just taking people away. And at some point, you tend to stop counting funerals. You stop remembering the exact dates. But what you never forget is the feeling of standing there again. Another graveside, another goodbye, another piece of your world gone. And eventually something strange begins to happen. You look around and realize you're the last one standing. That silence, that empty space left behind, it changes you. It reshapes how you see the world. It reshapes how you see yourself. because grief isn't just sadness. Grief is a identity disruption. It's the moment where the life you thought you were living suddenly disappears. And you're left with asking the question of, who am I now? And that question over the years, has followed me for years through, my life journey, through addiction, through recovery, through rebuilding everything after losing everything, and rebuilding a life from the ground upwards, and eventually into the work I do today as a therapist. Because when someone sits across from me in my therapy room and they tell me they feel lost, broken, or alone, I don't just hear it as a theory. I really recognize it because I've been there. And that level of experience creates a kind of compassion that really can't be taught in any classroom. It comes from true survival. And I can assure you that survival really changes you. So, what I've noticed is, in regards to a lot of guys I've had come into my practice, talking about something which most men seem to be really terrified of, is loneliness. In modern culture, loneliness is treated like a defect, like something has gone wrong, like it's something we need to escape immediately. So, what do we tend to do when that loneliness kicks in? And this is something I've observed and got to see through social media, and I'm still learning through these patterns of behavior, which hundreds and hundreds of guys I'm seeing doing, is that we tend to try and fill that silence. So, social media, work, alcohol, substances, distractions, noise, anything that stops us being alone with ourselves. But Carl Jung had a completely different perspective of this. He believed loneliness wasn't caused by the absence of people. Loneliness comes from being able to communicate the things that matter most to you. So think about that for a moment. You can be surrounded by people, thousands of followers online, a busy social life, and still feel completely alone. Why? Because the real parts of you remain hidden. Some of the pain, the grief, the fear, the parts of yourself you've learned to keep behind a mask. And Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are. But here's the catch. Individuation almost always begins in isolation. Because when the noise disappears, when the distractions fade, when the performance stops, you finally meet yourself. And that meeting can be uncomfortable because suddenly you're facing with a version of yourself that's been waiting to be heard for many years. And this is why sometimes loneliness can feel absolutely terrifying, but it can also be transformative, because loneliness is often not what we call a punishment. I'd say it's more of an invitation to stop performing and also stop becoming and start becoming. And at the core of my work is mainly person-centered counseling, which was developed by the famous psychologist Carl Rogers. And Rogers believed something powerful about human beings. He believed we all have an innate drive towards growth, a natural movement becoming healthier, more authentic, and more whole. But that movement gets blocked, usually by something which we call conditions of worth. And many men grow up believing they're only valid if they are either strong, successful, emotionally controlled, unbreakable. So we learn to hide anything that doesn't fit our image. So sadness, fear, that's one of the big ones, confusion, grief. But here's the truth: the mask might protect you for a while, but eventually it does suffocate you. And my role as a therapist isn't to fix someone like a machine. Certainly not my approach. And I think some people out there tend to think that is how you work in this way, but you really don't. It's to create a space where the mask can finally come off. And Carl Rogers described three core conditions that allow this to happen, which is empathy, unconditional positive regard, and congruence. An empathy, which means, truly understood, not judged, not analyzed, but heard. And unconditional positive regard means you accept exactly who you are, no performance required. And congruence means authenticity. The person you show to the world becomes aligned with the person you actually are. That's what I found through the years of practice and personal experience and journey, where I found that's where the real growth happens. As scary as it can be, as much as I know myself before I even went into this line of work, the amount of times I avoided that. I was scared, I was fearful, I didn't know which way was up. So I can really meet you guys with compassion there and really relate to that lonely part of our world and journey we go on without, not much support. That's why I reached out and gained the support I did, on my own many years back. So let's talk about something which many men experience, that feeling stuck. So the psychology of being stuck, and the cage we get trapped in. So, in cognitive behavioral therapy, we often talk about safety behaviors. These are the things that we do to protect ourselves emotionally, but over time they become a cage. For many men, emotional suppression becomes a safety barrier. We tell ourselves that I'm being strong, I can handle it, I will deal with it later. But what we're really doing is avoiding the learning zone, because if we allow ourselves to feel grief, feel fear, the sadness, we can be quite terrified we might lose control. So instead, we stay frozen, functional on the outside, disconnected on the inside. And this creates a cognitive dissonance. Your mind says, I'm fine, but your internal world says, I'm falling apart. And I certainly know for myself, but eventually, something one way or another has to give. So, we can go into different set mind frames of our defenses. And prime example is the anger iceberg, grief in disguise. So one of the most misunderstood emotions men experience is anger. Anger is often just the visible tip of something deeper. And therapists call this, the anger iceberg. So above the surface, what we see is anger. But what people don't realize below that surface can be grief, loss, fear, loneliness. Anger feels more powerful, and grief feels helpless. So what does our brain do? It chooses anger, which is more powerful for us. But real healing begins when we allow ourselves to recognize what's underneath. And for myself over the years, that meant sitting with the reality of losing my entire closest family members, asking the hardest question imaginable is, who am I now? and answering it honestly. That was one of the biggest, scariest moments of my life, sitting in my own shadow, in my own loneliness, challenging my thoughts. Any negative or, anxious, provoking thoughts I had no choice but to sit there and challenge it. And don't get me wrong, I have regular supervision to help me with my private caseload of clients, which, as accredited therapist, all of us need to be able to do that, as well as seeing my own personal therapist, who I see every few months, because life can be tough. If people out there seem to think that as therapists have had like a very privileged life and everything's been perfect, I can tell you now that, I can assure you that many of us haven't. I wish we did. I'd have less wrinkles and less grey hair. But, I worked hard for these. And what I've noticed as well, I scraped across this a little bit earlier in regards to social media, the digital savior, performing versus processing. So, social media has created something fascinating as well as dangerous. Noticing men drowning in their own grief, trying to save everybody else. And in Jungian or Carl Jung psychology, this is called projection. You're projecting the healer you need onto other people. But here's the truth: you cannot heal others while abandoning yourself. So let's strip away your followers. Let's strip away the camera. Let's strip away that audience. Who are you in that silence? That question is where the work, or the real work, really begins. Without your audience, without your followers, without the camera, who are you in that silence? Are you prepared to sit within that shadow and challenge your thoughts around that to truly discover who the man you are? It's one of the hardest things for many of us to do. And I think some people through social media don't think that as therapists see that, because some of us have been through it. And hopefully, with this talk I've given, has given you some provocative thoughts, some ideas to understand that you're not alone. Professionals who are trained like myself, who are here to support you, not be against you, not take away your followers. I work full time in the NHS as well as my private practice. I'm working day and night. So, jumping on social media, just having a little talk about anxiety or depression, I can assure you I've done, over a decade of that work, and I'm talking day and night and even weekends. So I don't just click on a camera and perform for people. I work with people in this industry. So reach out. I'm not here to take anything from you. Hopefully, I'm helping you to discover who you truly are and who you want to be, and hopefully give you an opportunity to drop that mask. And at my practice, Garon Green Therapies, the work which I'm based on is solution focused. But solution focused doesn't mean avoiding the pain. It means walking through it together. Because inside the darkest experiences of your life, there is often something valuable, something that shapes the person you can become. And sometimes the strongest step a man can truly take is simply reaching out and asking for support. If you'd like to speak to me, a telephone call, by all means, contact me at garongreentherapies.com, or send me an email at garongreentherapies@gmail.com, and I'll answer any questions you may have and support you in any way, or at least point you in the right direction. So, if you're tired of the crash and burn cycle, if you're tired of the silence after the screen goes blank, then maybe it's time to stop running. Stop looking for answers in the comment sections and start looking for them in the room. I won't judge you, because I've stood exactly where you're standing. Visit garongreentherapies.com. Drop the defense, drop the mask, and let's do the real work and get you back on your feet. I'm Garon Green, and thank you again for listening. And I will see you in another random episode I'll be recording as well. I do have some amazing guests coming up within the coming months, which I'm really looking forward to. And if you can resonate with some of the things I say or some of the amazing guests, and which is giving you an idea of sharing your story as a guest on the Green Room podcast, feel free to get in touch at garongreentherapies@gmail.com and get in touch. The whole purpose of this podcast is sharing your story with somebody who can regulate their emotions and be able to tell an inspiring story from, the ground upwards. What helped you turn your life around, just so we can reach out to that one person out there who's sat there on their own in loneliness. I'm not here for clicks. I'm certainly not here for people patting me on the back left, right and center, because this is the work I do. So if I reached out to that one person just alone on this podcast and they can resonate with that, well, I've done my bit. So this is Garon signing out from the Green Room podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to hearing from some of you guys soon. And feel free to get in touch, as I said, if you've got a short story to tell. Spit my words out. Feel free to share it, and I'll do the best I can to put that spotlight on you and your practice which you're doing. So, whether you're a professional working within the industry I'm in, or somebody who's got a hell of a story to tell, which has helped them succeed and help them get through dark times, here's the place. This is your platform. Reach out at garongreentherapies@gmail.com. So thank you so much for listening. And this is Garon Green signing out of the Green Room podcast. Thank you.